statements, and everyone joins except for Jackson, who agrees but does not want a mistrial because of Greg's health. You know, the other day when we came back from lunch, we took an extra long break because Greg wasn't feeling well and he had to kind of make it to the end. So Greg's, you know, health is his main concern. He is saying, though, and this is Jackson, that he agrees with everything and added a couple others that he's been objected to, all these things over and over, and the judge is not leaning anyway. So Leventhal, he gives, what is that called when they have he gives other court cases to defend what he's saying, and this takes some time, and they look at it, and what his main objection is that here we're giving all these co-conspirator statements. They haven't proven the conspiracy yet. They haven't even mentioned Leventhal's client Scott at all yet. Pretty much we've mentioned Todd Engel once, or not Todd Engel, we've mentioned Ricky Loveland once on a bolo, and a lot about Eric. So basically Eric's up there right now. The judge decides that, you know, she's not going to go with the mistrial, but what she is going to do is she has made a code for conspiracy or co-conspirator statement that she will use from here on out. She also offered that the defense create a jury restriction or instruction on how to strike those comments. And these are all of her previous co-conspirator statement comments, because he says that it is tainting our jury, making them biased. We come back with Agent Shalakis. He is in the BLM. He is video recording people. He was one of the men that was in Give the Role to, let's see.
Contact Bundys.
Yeah, he was initially given the role to contact the Bundys, and then he was also in charge of the team that went undercover, the 4 people. At one point, he was asked, you know, he goes through his video, which he turns on and off because the battery's dying. He says that in the beginning. And he's just watching different areas, watching the traffic, watching the wash, and talking about it as he goes along. At one point in the video, he says, he marks Eric in the video many times. He marks other people in the video many times as well. But at one point he says, and at this point, and I mean, I'm telling you, the video's from far away, you can hardly see, he said, and that's when he pointed his rifle at the agents. In cross-examination just started, and he starts with still shots from the video, because the still shots you're able to go and zoom in on. So he's got all these, 5 different still shots, and he goes through the still shots, and in the still shots you can see that he is not pointing his weapon, but instead adjusting it because the strap has come over, and he's got his one hand on the strap and he's adjusting it, and the barrel never comes up. So I think that they pretty much threw that out just there. Tomasi comes up and asks if he was there on the 11th and if the operation came to an end. The gentleman said it was because there was a helicopter pilot that had died in duty, and that the plane pilot needed to go to the funeral, and that's why they were ceasing operations. And then he was also asked if he saw NHP, which was Nevada Highway Patrol, on the bridge, and they made no arrests. Now we go into Engel. Engel did an amazing job today.
He did.
There is some things, I'm going to say that the judge, after Leventhal kind of threw this all out there in the beginning, you definitely saw a change with the judge. She was a little more lenient with the defense, a little harder on the prosecution, and she really, you can tell that she likes Engel. Engel said in this video, you can hear him commentating, "We are praying that this is going to be a peaceful protest." And then he's talking about they're getting their guns out. And then we're talking about people wearing camo. And because in the video he keeps saying the militia's arriving, and he said, well, how can you tell who's the militia? And he's like, can you point out anyone in this room that might be the militia? And he's like, well, no. And he's like, well, you're saying that these people out in the crowd are militia because they're wearing camo. Could camo not also be worn for hunting? The guy wanted to argue that the camo that they were wearing couldn't, But in the end, he agrees that yes, the camo they were wearing could be used for hunting. He also brought up the fact that, you know, if people sitting in a courtroom are going to be wearing different things than people who are out in a wash are going to be wearing. It was brought up many times that he heard over the radio, all employees sling your long guns, sling your long guns. You know, we brought this up many times in the defense that how many times they were asked to put their guns away and nobody did. He also said, okay, in the video you said that violence was about to come our way. He said, but it did not. And Shalaka said, thank the Lord. And Todd lowered his head and said, amen. And I thought that was very powerful.
Awesome at that moment.
The jury definitely did that well. So yes, that was great. And then he asked if he'd ever had a gun pointed at him. And he said, yes. He said, well, were you scared when you had a gun pointed at you? And he said, yes. And he's like, if you had a gun pointed at you, would you immediately take cover? And that was objected to, and I believe the questioning was stopped there. Then we have Todd, who did another amazing job. He brings up a timestamp from a video. And he keeps bringing up these timestamps from different videos, and then he brings up the still picture of the green truck with the agents pointing the rifles. And he's bringing up all of these timestamp things with the green truck pointing weapons at the crowd. And at the end of it, I mean, it's over and over again. He's brought up that possibly, he said, so you could say for about 40 minutes, agents were pointing their weapons at the crowd. And obviously that was objected to, and he said no further questions and sat at his chair. But I believe he got the point across that they're trying to say for this half of an instant in this video that you can't really see, Eric's pointing his weapon. But here you have the BLM agents, the Park Service agents pointing their weapons for 40 minutes.
And they kept saying that they were looking through their optics on their long guns. So they were pointing their guns at the protesters, looking at them through their optics, through their scope. So the whole time these agents are pointing their gun at the protesters because they're using their optics on their long guns. So I thought that was interesting.
Yes. And then the government, while Todd's speaking, the government objects several times. The judge lets Todd continue and even helps him rephrase one of the questions so that he could continue. So here we're seeing the judge be a little more lenient to us. Leventhal goes up next and was asking if Shalakis was working when Dave Bunny was arrested. That was immediately objected to, and he had to move on. I guess Leventhal was the one that was bringing up the militia and who you could pick out of the militia.
His question was, how do you determine who's the militia and how do you determine who isn't militia? And he couldn't answer it. And it was objected to several times. The only thing he really could come up with was with camo.
We got through quite a few people today. Did we have 3 people?
Yeah.
So the government's going through quickly. They're just getting their information in, and cross-examination is going quickly. Next up, Special Agent Scott Swanson. He's been 6 years with the BLM. He normally does long-term investigation with the BLM regarding theft of minerals, wild burl roundups, and marijuana grows. He was a ranger for 5 years prior to that, has worked with the Border Patrol and been in the U.S. Army.
The one thing I found interesting too with him is the prosecution asked him if he was a sworn-in officer, and he said yes. Now, sworn-in officer, to me, he's not Metro, he's not Highway Patrol. How can he be in a sworn-in officer? That didn't.
He is one of the gentlemen that goes to the blue truck and is sighting people with his rifle. He says that he was asked to be...
where's my notes?
A counter sniper and to cover the men in the wash. And this is because that his optics has 3 times the normal eyesight view on it, whereas the most of the other optics did not. He had planned to return fire if shooting had started, and he was basically hearing threats on the radio and trying to find them in his scope. Talked a lot about the black hat man and the tan hat man, and he was pretty much focusing on Eric. He said a lot of the time he could identify him by what he was wearing. He identified him on the wash, and he was watching most of the time. At the end of his...
Real fast on Eric, he could identify him so well with that scope 3 times that he knew he had a black hat on, that it looked to have a mesh on the back, that he was black bearded, and his sunglasses weren't the thick kind, they were just the wired kind. He was wearing a plaid shirt and his rifle was slung. Just with the 3 times, that's not that powerful. 3 times scope.
Then
he was probably about, I would say, 400 yards at least.
But he said he testified to only 100, 150, right?
Yeah, but I would say he was a lot more than that.
Then he says he asked Richardson to get the binocs out to help him locate threats because there was so many threats coming over the radio that he couldn't keep up. And that people were moving in a tactical manner and making them feel threatened. He was concentrating on Eric. He goes into a statement at the end. And they're still in direct examination of him. But he gets teary on the stand, and he says at one point Eric went down and he raised his barrel onto the concrete barrier, the Jersey barrier, and he said in his background he has Eric in his sights. He takes the gun off safety. He pulls. He pulls
half cocked.
He half cocked, but he used some weird terminology for that. And he says then at that moment, and he starts to get teary, that he sees a van going by behind him, and there's a soccer ball painted on the van, and in the van, on the back of the van, and in the van you can see little girls' faces up against the window. And at that moment, he uncocked his weapon and put the safety back on, is what he said. And he just knew that he couldn't fire at that moment, and that if he just sat there hoping and waiting for fire to come upon him. And that's pretty much where we left the day. He will be going back in tomorrow morning. We'll start with him again. He did get teary and emotional during that episode, and it definitely touched the jury for sure. So here we have, when we went into this, there was supposedly one person that was going to say this because there was plenty of pictures on the bridge. Nobody has a picture of Eric pointing his rifle above the Jersey barrier because it didn't happen. But here we have today 3 people that have testified that he's done that. One person we were able to completely knock out because he's got this picture where he says, oh look, there he does it. But in the picture you can definitely tell that he's just getting his strap off of his neck. And so the lawyers did a really good job of throwing that one out. We'll see how they do tomorrow with this agent. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.